Welcome to another masterpiece of mayhem. Cunning criminals. We will cover the 300-year-old crown jewel heist in Sweden. Thieves on speedboats steal priceless royal treasures. What happened next? The early morning fog hung low over the small, quaint Swedish village of Strängnäs, like a shroud of mystery, concealing secrets far older than the village itself. The church bells rang faintly in the distance, a regular sound, yet it carried a strange weight on this particular day, as if the air itself knew that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The year was 2018. The sun had yet to rise, but the world was already stirring, unknowing of the dark, audacious act that would shake the foundations of history. At first glance, the day seemed like any other, but inside the Strängnäs Cathedral, a centuries-old institution, a scene of sheer audacity was unfolding. The vaults, guarded by time, tradition, and steel, housed objects so rare, so precious, that their mere existence could send the most hardened thieves into a frenzy. This was not just any robbery. This was the heist of the century, one that would erase the line between myth and reality. In the heart of the cathedral, behind layers of security, lay the Swedish crown jewels, pieces of a royal legacy that had remained untouched for centuries. These treasures weren't just jewelry, they were symbols of the nation's strength, pride, and history. Among them, the crown, the scepter, and the orb, all ornate, encrusted with priceless gems, gold, and delicate filigree, were the embodiment of Sweden's monarchy, an heirloom of untold value. Yet, despite their power and significance, these sacred artifacts were about to vanish without a trace. The crown jewels had been passed down through the royal families of Sweden for generations. Each piece held a story. Each gem embedded in the royal regalia had been chosen with the care of a monarch. The artifacts were more than objects. They were the visual markers of Swedish sovereignty and their royal lineage. But on this fateful day, in an act that would send shockwaves around the globe, they would become the ultimate prize in a heist that seemed almost too incredible to believe. The culprits were not masterminds cloaked in shadows, nor slick professional thieves. No, these were men of a different ilk, audacious, brazen, and with a plan that defied the very concept of what it meant to steal. They were not subtle. They were not sophisticated. They simply saw opportunity, and they seized it with the force of a tidal wave. As the world slept, the thieves made their move. A silver van, unmarked and ordinary, rolled quietly down the narrow streets of Strängnäs. In the back, 3 men sat in tense silence, their faces covered by masks. The van's tires barely made a sound as it glided through the early morning mist. The streets were empty, save for the occasional stray dog and the glow of dim streetlights, casting long shadows on the cobblestone roads. It was a town that had never seen anything close to the violence that was about to unfold. The church, with its ancient spires rising toward the sky, stood tall and untouched, like a sentinel guarding centuries of history. And then, in an instant, it was all about to change. The heist had been planned for months. The thieves had been studying the cathedral, learning its rhythm. They knew when the priests would arrive for early mass, when the tourists would shuffle in for their daily visitations, and when the doors would be left unlocked. They knew the exact location of the crown jewels, hidden behind a thick metal door, guarded by an array of complicated systems that would have deterred most criminals. But the thieves didn't care. To them, this was a challenge, and they were ready to face it. Inside the van, one of the thieves checked his watch. The time had come. They knew the cathedral was about to close for the day, but it was more than that. They had watched the guards, the routines, and the shift changes. They knew this was the moment when the window of opportunity would open wide. The van rolled slowly to a stop near the church, and the thieves spilled out with a single purpose: to get in, grab the jewels, and vanish into the mist. They didn't sneak in through a back door or climb through a secret passage. Instead, they walked straight up to the front entrance, bold and unafraid, with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you've already won. The cathedral was empty, save for the few remaining tourists who had lingered too long. The thieves didn't waste a moment. With practiced hands, they forced open the doors, not with the silence of a ghost, but with the weight of inevitability. The church, as though it knew it was about to be violated, seemed to groan under the weight of what was coming. Inside, the grandeur of the cathedral stretched before them. The scent of old wood, polished marble, and incense filled the air, mixing with the silence that hung like a heavy fog. The thieves moved quickly through the aisles, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpets beneath them. The interior, with its towering columns and ancient stained-glass windows, was breathtaking in its majesty, but they didn't have time to appreciate its beauty. They were on a mission that would soon rewrite the history of Sweden's most sacred artifacts. As they approached the vault, the tension grew palpable. Every step brought them closer to the unimaginable. The vault that held the crown jewels had been built with the kind of security that could have made even the most seasoned thieves reconsider their plans. It was a complex system of alarms, locks, and sensors. But the thieves were not deterred. They had spent months, years even, researching the cathedral's weaknesses, identifying the blind spots, and learning the layout. They knew how to disable the alarm systems with surgical precision. One man worked the keypad, his fingers flying over the buttons with practiced ease. The other stood guard, scanning the space for any sign of trouble. Seconds passed. The vault door clicked open. There, before them, were the crown jewels, the treasures that had been coveted for centuries. The crown, made of gold and precious jewels, sat on a velvet pillow. The scepter, long and regal, gleamed in the dim light, while the orb, golden and smooth, lay beside it. The thieves could feel the weight of history in the room. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about the jewels. This was about taking something that had belonged to a nation for hundreds of years. It was about claiming power, if only for a moment. The clock was ticking. They knew they didn't have much time. And then, in a move that would forever haunt the history books, the thieves turned their backs on the treasures of Sweden and made their way out of the vault. The crown jewels, once thought to be untouchable, were now in their possession, and the thieves disappeared into the shadows as swiftly and silently as they had arrived. No alarms, no witnesses, no trace left behind. The greatest heist in Swedish history had just been completed. But what happened next? Did they vanish into the night, their faces forever obscured, the jewels tucked safely away? Or had they made a fatal mistake? That's where the story begins to unravel, where the darkness grows deeper, and where questions emerge that no one could have anticipated. The van sped through the winding Swedish roads, the early morning light beginning to creep over the horizon. The fog was beginning to lift, but the weight of what had just occurred hung in the air. Inside, the thieves felt the adrenaline coursing through their veins, each second of their escape more precious than the last. They had done it. They had stolen the crown jewels of Sweden, the very symbol of royal power and history. The heavy bag containing the gold, jewels, and relics was securely locked between them, but there was no time to celebrate. They knew that every moment they spent on the road increased the chances of being caught. It wasn't just the jewels they had stolen. It was a piece of Sweden's soul. The crown jewels had not only been symbols of royal authority, but they were also linked to the nation's identity. No one had dared to attempt a robbery of this magnitude, especially not on these sacred grounds. The weight of what they had taken pressed down on them, but it wasn't the burden of guilt that made their hearts race. It was the certainty that they weren't alone in this chase. Back in Strängnäs, the cathedral remained eerily silent. The theft had gone unnoticed until it was too late. The thief's calculated timing had ensured that no one would be in the cathedral when the heist took place. But as the church's caretaker arrived for his early shift, the truth hit like a hammer. The vault was opened, the treasures gone. Panic set in. The police were called. They arrived quickly, but in their haste, they knew that they were dealing with something far bigger than a simple robbery. The crown jewels were not mere trinkets. They were national treasures. News of the heist spread across Sweden like wildfire, and within hours the entire country was on edge. Authorities knew that these jewels could not simply be sold on the open market. They were too iconic, too rare. They were the crown jewels, literally and figuratively, of the Swedish monarchy. And whoever stole them had to have a plan. They were not amateurs. The police began their investigation immediately, but the trail was cold. There were no witnesses. The security footage from the cathedral had been wiped clean. The thieves had covered their tracks, and the only thing left to do was to piece together the scant clues left behind. The investigators soon realized that the thieves had thought of everything, from the precise timing of their entry to the meticulous way they had avoided leaving fingerprints. It was clear that they were professionals. But as the hours stretched into days, the authorities grew desperate. There had to be a way to track the thieves down. The royal family, too, was in a state of disbelief. The jewels were a part of their history, an integral piece of their heritage. They couldn't just let them slip into the shadows. The Swedish government immediately ordered a nationwide manhunt, and even Interpol was brought into the fold. But the thieves remained elusive. Weeks passed, and the case began to grow cold. The public's fascination with the crime didn't wane, but the pressure on the authorities was mounting. Every lead turned out to be a dead end. Rumors circulated that the jewels had been smuggled out of the country, hidden away in some foreign land where no one could ever find them. Others claimed the thieves were still in Sweden, lying low, waiting for the heat to die down before making their next move. But then a breakthrough came when a seemingly unrelated piece of information surfaced. A tip-off from a former criminal associate had led the authorities to a house on the outskirts of Stockholm. The house had been rented under a fake name, and when the police arrived, they found it abandoned. However, there was a telltale sign that couldn't be ignored. A faint smell of polish and gold lingered in the air, a trace of something precious. It was the first real lead the authorities had gotten in weeks. The police seized the house and combed through every inch of it. Hidden beneath a floorboard, in a secret compartment, they found something that made their hearts race. The crown scepter, still gleaming, untouched. The thieves had hidden it here, but it was clear now that they had been interrupted in their escape. The heist was far from over, but this discovery gave the police a renewed sense of urgency. The chase was on again. Unbeknownst to the authorities, the thieves had already moved the crown jewels to a different location. They knew they could not afford to keep them in one place for too long, especially not with the heat growing hotter. They had trusted no one, not even each other, for fear of betrayal. Every one of them knew that the jewels were worth millions, but the consequences of being caught would be far worse than any amount of money. The thieves were living in the shadows now, always moving, always looking over their shoulders. They didn't trust anyone, not even those who had been part of the plan from the beginning. There were whispers that some of them had started turning on each other. Greed had a way of eating away at even the closest of bonds, and yet, through it all, the crown jewels remained their most prized possession. They were a symbol of their audacity, of their skill. And they were going to keep them at any cost. But even in their darkest moments, the thieves couldn't escape the mounting pressure. It was clear that the authorities were closing in on them. The police had started to piece together a pattern, and they knew that the final stage of the chase was coming. The jewels were worth too much to be hidden away forever. Sooner or later, someone would try to sell them. And then finally, the tip-off came. A local art dealer, known for his connections to the underground world, had been spotted in a meeting with one of the thieves. The police acted quickly, surrounding the dealer's establishment and waiting for the inevitable. Within hours, they had what they needed: the full identities of the thieves and the location of the crown jewels. The final confrontation was tense, fast, and deadly. It all came to a head when the police raided an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Stockholm. The thieves had set up shop there, using the location to plan their next move, but they hadn't anticipated how close the authorities were. The moment the police stormed in, gunfire erupted. The thieves fought back, but they were cornered, desperate. It was a standoff that could have turned deadly, but the police had the upper hand. In a flash of precision, the authorities neutralized the threat. The crown jewels, however, were not recovered. The thieves had hidden them one last time, in a place so secret, so concealed, that even the authorities couldn't find them. Despite the arrests and the end of the violent pursuit, the crown jewels remained missing. The heist, in the eyes of many, was not truly over. For years after, people would continue to wonder, who took them? And where were they now? The crown jewels were never recovered, and the heist would go down in history as one of the most daring, mysterious, and unsolved robberies of all time. It raised more questions than answers, leaving a trail of intrigue that would echo through the annals of Swedish history forever. And in the end, that was perhaps the most audacious part of all. The heist had become a legend, woven into the fabric of Swedish mythology, as elusive and valuable as the treasures it had stolen.